Really catchy title for my presentation. So I hope you all enjoy that. There's been a lot of work done at BYU recently on wildfires and the way that they propagate and the way that they spread through sparse shrubs, through small bushes, and through things that are living versus things that are dead, which is what a lot of the research has been done on. So I'm not going to review those things that have been done. I'm just going to talk briefly about a couple of the things that we've done since I've been here. This is the task list for my prospectus, and we're going to talk today about number 2. And I'll explain more why that's important right now. So, like I mentioned, there's been a lot of work done at BYU. One of the things that's been found in the last few years is that the models that exist right now do not describe live shrub combustion well. In one of the places where they fall short is actual location of leaves or branches or things within the shrub or the tree that is burning. And the second bullet point, there was some work done by Parsons and some of his coworkers a couple of years ago, and they had the exact same amount of mass within a volume, overall bulk density, but in one set of experiments they kept the bulk density homogeneous throughout the volume, and in another one they allowed it to vary while keeping the overall density the same. And burning characteristics were very different. And so they concluded that the actual placement of a leaf or a branch matters, not just overall kind of how much stuff is there to burn. So we have started doing some experiments to try and understand a little bit more about that. So right now, the model that BYU has developed right now, we identify a domain that the shrub or the bush occupies, and then just kind of randomly distribute leaves and branches within that domain. So the second bullet point corresponds to this first bullet point under growth patterns. That was the model they used, was what they called Fuel 3D. And another model for kind of the same idea is an L-Systems model that was written here. And then what we are trying to do right now is to use laser scanning. So the difference between the laser scanning and what I call growth patterns is that growth patterns just kind of take the natural recurring shapes that plants grow in and then just kind of essentially grow a bush using those shapes recurring upon themselves. And then with laser scanning, what we're trying to do is actually scan the shrub and identify exactly where things are, so that we can use that in the model. So the purpose for the experiments that we did is to allow for model validation, to see if we can understand exactly where the different parts of the fuel are, if models actually behave properly, and if they can predict things well. Another reason is to see if laser scanning can work, to see if we can get it to work with the models, if we can extract useful information to use. And then to check the difference between live versus dead behavior, and also just to perform experiments on this scale. There haven't been very many with full-scale bushes, full-size bushes. So this is the experimental setup that we had. It was in a wind tunnel. So we used Excelsior as an ignition source. We had a constant wind speed. We had 2 shrubs. One of them was what we call the ignition shrub, which is essentially the Excelsior started the first shrub on fire, and then our goal was to then get a steady propagation from the first shrub to the second shrub so that we could actually watch what a real fire would be like that is not influenced by the ignition source. That's what we wanted to do. So the data that we collected a lot of data. I'm going to review a couple things. We're going to look at surface temperatures, flame temperatures, heat flux, and the overall spread rate. So just a quick overview. I'm going to compare 2 burns just briefly. The mass amounts that we had, our high density burns were right around 4,500, 5,000 grams, and our low density burns were about 2,000 grams. And then Burn number 9, which as you're looking at it, burn number 9 will always be on the right. The data from 9 and the data from 3 will always be on the left. So 9 was a fresh shrub, high moisture content. 3 was an old shrub, low moisture content. It had been cut down for about a week when we burned it. So these are some of the results that we found. So the top 2 graphs, again, 9 is on the right, 3 is on the left. This is the gas temperature that we measured. And it should be noted, these values that I have here are not, shouldn't be used for their raw values just yet. We have to do some temperature correction for the thermocouples, but it's a little bit complicated due to our experimental setup. The thermocouples themselves are inside the flames and surrounded by the bushes, and so getting something like a view factor and identifying what the surface is that the thermocouple is seeing are kind of difficult. So we haven't done that yet. The reason that I showed them here, though, is to show the difference between fresh shrubs and old shrubs. So here we can see, so thermocouples 3, 5, and 6. We had 10 thermocouples. Number 7 was on the end of the shrub, the far side from the ignition source, and then 8, 9, and 10 usually weren't in the shrubs. We didn't have shrubs that big. So what we see is that thermocouple 6 got hot much sooner in a dead shrub than in a live shrub. And so we're comparing the difference in saying that fundamentally something that's alive burns differently than something that's dead, which is what we've seen in experiments on small leaves and small branches here at BYU, but we haven't spent a lot of time looking at it on the shrub scale. And then again here, the heat flux, same thing, much higher heat release earlier on, whereas the heat release is lower overall, but extends out for a longer time. And we'll see the rate of spread information right here. So I apologize that the scales on the top graphs aren't the same. I didn't take the time to change that. But so you can see as the color goes from, and I'm colorblind, so I might say the wrong colors. It goes from black to blue to red to yellow to something, I don't know. So it shows kind of the time scale, the way that it burns, right? And so you can see, and given the difference in scales, on burn number 9, we're around 80 to 90 seconds when the foliage burns all the way through. But then the reason why it continues to burn and why there's some yellow and red near the bottom is because the branches kept burning, and we'll talk about that in a second. Burn number 3 got to the end. It's still, as near as I can tell, more blue than burn number 9 is on the end, but because the scales are different, it represents the fact that burn number 3, it went through in about 40 or 50 seconds rather than 80 or 90. And then again, the thicker bushes kept burning. So again, things that are alive are very different than things that are dead. These are surface temperatures using an IR camera. It's just one time step throughout the run, and they're different time steps. I tried to pick 2 time steps that were about the same in terms of amount that's burned, just to show that these data haven't been analyzed as well as they could be, but that's something that we have, and beyond showing cool pictures, we can use it for actual surface chemistry and surface reaction rates. And then something that was interesting that we didn't expect to see is that the sagebrush, which is what we were burning here, the stems themselves stayed burning for a long time and kept burning and kept burning and kept burning, which is something that we hadn't seen for other species. And we think there's a couple reasons for that. One of this, what I call shredded bark, you can see kind of the pieces that are just kind of falling off. That's something that's going to ignite really easily. The other thing, which is what was really surprising when we cut open a stem, this is a picture of when it was actually cut open. It's a cross section, and you can see that the big stem of a sagebrush is actually several little stems that have grown together. And so what we think happens is that as it burns, each of those individual stems begin to shrink, and it opens up these pores in between the different stems, so that then heat and oxygen can get actually inside of the stem into the interior, and so that it actually continues burning for a long time, which is not something that we saw for other species of plants. So it allows for continued flaming and smoldering. Whether or not it increases fire danger depends on the situation. If a fire has blown through and you have something like this that's still smoldering, but there's no fresh fuel within a mile, it's probably not going to increase the fire danger. But if it's on the perimeter of a fire, it certainly could do that in terms of flaring up again. So a couple of the conclusions from the work that we've done so far. So we believe that the data we've collected are high quality and that they can be used for model validation. And we saw again that fresh shrubs burn differently than dead shrubs. I didn't talk about the density that we measured and how it affected the way that things burned, but we did find out that it matters. It matters a lot. And then the last bullet point of what we just talked about, that sagebrush stems, the actual wood part, burns very differently than other species because of its interesting growth patterns. These are the references that I have. And then thanks to the people that helped, especially to Dallin and Victoria, they wrote a lot of the analysis codes for the videos that we used, and I changed them, but most of the work was theirs in terms of the coding. So.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Dr.
You have 20 seconds.